I punched a Wolfman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I got a story for you from the old hardcore punk days. Don't worry, it's also a werewolf story, as you can tell from the title. This is about a fight I got into with a musician who turned out to be a werewolf. I'm using the term musician lightly and broadly in this guy's sense. He was never considered a virtuoso. But he is still alive, and I'd assume he's still a werewolf. So you couldn't pay me to name his name. I'm not going to name myself either, except to say that I'm from New York, the boroughs specifically, and this guy and his band were from the Midwest. No, it wasn't Husker Du or the Zero Boys, but they were an early 80s punk band, usually classified as hardcore, and they were touring at the time. Back in those days, the hardcore scene survived in spite of all obstacles. The clubs didn't pay the bands enough to afford to get a place to stay, so we bands in New York City would put bands from out of town up in our apartments, often having them sleep on the kitchen floor. And when we toured to their towns, they would let us sleep in their closet or garage or whatever they had available. There were also some women who would help out and let bands sleep over when they were on tour, but hardcore generally had fewer female groupies than other kinds of music, at least in the earlier days. It was literally violent at a lot of the shows, and most women were not into that sort of thing, at least not back in the day. So because of all this, I had agreed to let this particular Midwest punk band sleep over at the apartment I was sharing with my then girlfriend, who we can call Claudine. Claudine worked as a hairdresser, and she was sort of a fashion icon, at least by the standards of our working class neighborhood in Queens. She wore cat lady sunglasses, pedal pushers, and cha-cha heels. She also always experimented on herself with wild hairstyles, so it was like living with a character from a John Waters movie in some ways. Even though she was a weirdo, she was a local weirdo, so everyone knew her, it seemed. We would walk down the street and people would call out to her from houses and cars. One time, the owner of a flower shop ran out and gave her a rose. Turns out her mom used to buy flowers there every Sunday. He had known Claudine since she was a kid. As well-liked as the girl was in Queens, though, she didn't always get along with the musicians I would invite to stay over. This was one of those times where the band showed up to drop their stuff off before the show, and Claudine found something to disagree about with each of the three of these guys. This kind of thing eventually led to us breaking up, but that was a couple or 3 years in the future still when this was happening. She would tell me she thought I was a great musician, but she actually wanted me to quit and get a day job. She kept trying to drive wedges between me and other guys on the punk and music scenes because she didn't really want me to get any more serious about my career. She didn't mind it as a hobby, but she hated when I go on tour. At any rate, I went with the band on the subway into the city where their gig was. 2 of them hooked up with Manhattan women and found better places to spend that night than my apartment way out in Queens. The 2 of them arranged with me to drop by the next day to pick up their stuff, and they went off with their new lady friends. The drummer, however, seemed to have no groupies in New York City, and so he gathered his stuff and asked me to show him how to get back to my place. Now, this was a huge man, and I don't want to get into any more detail than that. I've already given too many clues about who I'm talking about here, and I don't want him to come looking for me to shut me up. I doubt he's gotten any smaller in the years since this happened. I remember he carried his drum kit broken down in bags over his shoulder. We took the train out to Queens, where they announced that there was no service, and that we had to get out and walk. You know, I don't think they do that anywhere except Queens, as far as I can tell. I've been told it's to make it difficult to get home from the city late at night on purpose. Why would they do that? Because the powers that be don't want the working class in Queens leaving their own neighborhoods at night. They want them watching elite-sponsored programming on television, then going to sleep to get up for their jobs. They don't want them going into town to watch guys scream about anarchy as a solution to social problems. But as tough as it was to get home by subway to the boroughs in those days, this night was the worst of all. When they canceled one line, they would always have a backup plan. Or failing that, they'd have a free shuttle bus to take you the rest of the way home. Not that night. We were told the only station trains were stopping at, and it was a 20-minute walk from where we were, after 4 in the morning. Imagine being in a large modern city, and yet still somehow being in the middle of nowhere. That was what happened to me and that drummer. Since the closest train was 20 minutes away, and my apartment was 35 or 40 minutes away, we both decided to just walk to the apartment, as miserable as the concept seemed to us both. So I think I saw more of Queens that night than I'd ever seen before, and it's all pretty unmemorable in my opinion. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that it's all the same. Houses in some places, apartments, stores. It looks the same as the rest of America, only somehow grimier and more densely packed together. And that night, it seemed that whatever block we chose to walk down went uphill. It was tiring, and we were both getting cranky. The drummer started to accuse me of doing all this on purpose. You knew that train wasn't going to run all the way, didn't you? No, of course not. But you live here, how could you not know? Because this has never happened before, that's how. Whatever I said, he seemed to assume I was lying. The more I defended myself, the more angry he got about being lied to. I mean, I was telling the truth, but to him it was all lies. Then I remember him claiming I said the walk wouldn't be long. I never said that. I told him what I told you, so that he could decide. Should we walk to the other train for 20 minutes or just walk home for 40? We were right on the corner of the Ice's King of Corona, but they were closed because it was really late. That was where he threw his drum stuff down, and he started screaming and ripping his clothing off. He was tearing off his shirt. He was throwing his jacket. I didn't understand what was happening. It was like he just suddenly started screaming and stripping. People asked me why I didn't run away, and there were actually a few reasons. First, I didn't think he was turning into a werewolf in Queens in front of the Ice's King of Corona. That was not one of the possibilities running through my mind. Second of all, I felt a responsibility to the guy to get him to a bed. Or, well, a sleeping bag on our kitchen floor at least. I had promised this to him, and I could understand why he was tired and cranky. I still was just hoping to calm him down. I wasn't really aware that my life was starting to become endangered. Soon I had no choice but to accept this, though. I was facing a man transforming into a werewolf in front of my eyes. Actually, I was facing his chest and belly, as his head was much further above mine than it had even been before. This drummer towered over me when he was a human. I don't even know what word to use to describe how much bigger he was becoming, right before my eyes. It was when he started shouting something at me which sounded like a threat that I decided I'd better back away and give this guy some extra space. When he kept shouting, and I realized that it was no longer anything like recognizable English. That was when I turned and ran away from him. And he chased me. We ended up in a park over there, which is not actually the direction we should have been walking in. I don't remember why I ran that way, but I'm guessing that I was probably trying to lead the monster man away from my home and not toward it. Probably I was thinking about saving Claudine from the monster, since I was a real idiot about wanting to protect Claudine in those days. I thought she was my one true love and we'd be together for life. But I looked at her Facebook the other day and she was bragging that her new boyfriend was her 50th boyfriend of her adult life. So I was probably risking my life leading the Wolfman away from this woman that likely doesn't even remember my name any longer. But regardless of the reason why, I remember leading the Wolfman on a wild goose chase through the park over there. I'm looking at the map to help me remember, and it says there's a Jurassic Park there now, where I think we were running. Either that wasn't there back then, or I'm misremembering the path we took. I don't remember any dinosaurs. I had my hands full with the werewolf. At any rate, we were among trees when I got too winded and I couldn't run any longer. It wasn't the forest, but it was a tree-heavy part of whatever park it was that we were running through, out there deep into the borough of Queens on that night so long ago. When I realized it was inevitable that we were going to fight, I did the opposite of the Wolfman. I didn't strip off my clothing. Instead, I zipped my leather jacket up. Leather is a kind of armor, and I had been in a few fistfights while wearing that very jacket, so I wasn't just zipping it up randomly. And then I faced off against the Wolfman, determined to focus on my defense, and to try to avoid him doing too much damage to me. I wasn't planning on even trying to hit him at all, or fight back in any way. I just wanted to survive as unscathed as possible for as long as I could manage. And then hope that something distracted the Beastman drummer so that I could make another break for it. Maybe it was his exhaustion, or maybe it was his dulled intelligence as a werewolf. But each time it lunged at me, I was able to not only avoid the attack, but to hit him in the process, or to use his momentum against him and toss him into trees and benches. I never actually studied martial arts before that night, but I have since, and that is what I was doing, a primitive and instinctual version of that night. My nervous system was extra nervous, as you can imagine. In the face of genuine death, it had decided to innovate and improvise. It made up moves that I later found out were hundreds, or even thousands of years old. Some people tell me that a guardian angel took over my body and caused me to know what to do. If that's true, then my guardian angel must be Bruce Lee, because I got off one lucky move after another. And I was just as surprised as the werewolf to find that I was holding my own in this confrontation. I could see the confusion and the fear in the Beastman's eyes. He was starting to wonder if maybe I was a fiercer opponent than he had thought. I, on the other hand, was thinking no such thing. I was amazed at how lucky I had gotten so far. I was thinking about how my luck could not possibly last too much longer, and I was wondering if maybe I could strike a truce with the Wolfman drummer so we could both go home and sleep. This was when I got the best look at the creature, when we reached our temporary standoff. He looked like a slimmer version of a bear, but his head was more canine, with pointed ears, not round bear ears. While he did have claws that looked as scary as a bear's claws, they looked closer to what I would call hands than paws or claws. Somehow, he still reminded me of that drummer he had been earlier in the evening, but he looked like an entirely different person. Maybe that was because he wasn't really a person at all any longer. I tried to talk sense to the creature that I had seen play drums in the city earlier that night. I looked for some kind of humanity in his eyes. I did see confusion there, but it was an animal kind of confusion. I spoke reassuringly. I spoke encouragingly. I tried not to sound like I was mad with him, and I tried to offer solutions. Maybe he could just calm down a bit and turn back to his normal form. Maybe we could shake hands and call a truce. And then maybe we could walk back to the Isis King and see if anyone had stolen his drum equipment yet from where he had left it on the sidewalk. He looked like he was listening to me, and it seemed that he was either considering my offer or else that he was at least trying to understand what I was saying. And that was when this cop came over and drew a gun on the drummer Wolfman, telling him to put his hands up. Well, that Wolfman drummer put a hand up all right, and when he put that hand down, it smacked the cop about 7 feet in an arc through the air, until he bashed hard into a metal garbage bin and crash-landed. "I'm not with him," I shouted idiotically. "He's not my friend," I insisted, and then I bravely ran away like a total chicken. I think I got about a block away when I started to feel guilty. What if the werewolf drummer hurt that cop back there? What if he was doing even worse than hurting him? I had to go back and help that cop, I felt. So I turned around with the intention of running back to the scene of the crime. But as soon as I turned around, I saw that I had no need to be concerned about that cop. He wasn't being attacked by the monster any longer. How did I know this? Because the monster drummer was chasing after me. And it was a chase, at least for a while. I had this idea that I could lose him, that I could get away from him. I tried cutting under and around and through things. I tried hiding. I tried confusing him. It didn't matter. He was on my tail and I couldn't seem to get away. Finally, I was slowing down to the point where I knew he was about to catch up to me, and I was gonna get cut up by the thing from behind anyway. So I turned and I decided to fight him. He seemed pretty surprised when I did that, and I used that surprise to my advantage. I remember grabbing his lower jaw with both of my hands, and I remember holding on with all my might. He swung me around and I clung to his lower jaw. At one point he had my feet off the ground. He was swinging me that strongly. My hands were literally in his mouth, over his teeth. It was a stupid desperation move on my part, but I was more desperate than I'd ever been in my life. I don't remember where we even were by this point, but we were out of the park by then. I remember a cop car with its siren blaring making a U-turn and parking on the sidewalk next to where we were fighting. The Wolfman drummer abandoned caring about me, and I let go of his lower jaw. Both of us were now more concerned with the police presence than we were with each other. The Wolfman took off running in a direction away from my home, while I stood there, leaning against a telephone pole and exhausted. The cop car took off screeching in the direction the beast was running, and I sat down on the sidewalk to catch my breath. Then I walked the rest of the way home and arrived as the sun was coming up. My girlfriend was asleep and I joined her. Later that day, the other two guys in the band came by to get the rest of their stuff, and they took the drummer's stuff with them. We never discussed what had happened, and my girlfriend never heard any of this story. In fact, I'm pretty sure I only ever told 2 people about this before, and both of those people passed away years ago. So I guess this is the only time I've really told the entire story about the time that I punched a Wolfman.
If I wear a spinny hat, will I look all hunky? Will I look like that handsome chap from that TV show, The Monkees? Everybody wants a woolen cat. The scary stories, beanie hat. Everybody knows it's a natural fact. The scary stories, beanie hat. Link is in this video's description if all goes according to plan. Available in black, which is like every color all at once, man.
Helena 66 once left our club, but now it's fixed. Please join me in welcoming back Helena 66, who has rejoined our channel memberships. That means she got to see this weekend's all-new Scary Members Only episode, I Turned My Dogs Into Werewolves. You can see and hear it too if you follow the advice of this next little feller, Hank. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.